On today's show, the Capitals pick up a big win over the Flyers, and Alex Ovechkin is 16 goals away from passing the great one, Wayne Gretzky.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the last 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the big win over the Flyers. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, Dan, the Flyers aren't that good this season. It should have been a walk in the park. Not the case, as the Philadelphia Flyers showed up to play, but the Capitals had the answer and picked up a big win. I'll talk about that a little bit later. I'll talk about how Alex Ovechkin, the great 8, is now 16 goals away from surpassing the great one, Wayne Gretzky. How excited are you as a Capitals fan? A little bit later, I'll talk about the real reason that Logan Thompson got snubbed for the Four Nations face-off. And in the final segment, center depth, a bit of a question mark for the Capitals. But just to get it going here, a big win for the Capitals over the Flyers. John Tortorella pushing the buttons, facing Matvei Michkov, who tried a Michigan-style goal against Charlie Lindgren, but he slammed the door. But Matvei Michkov showing up big, 2 goals in the game. Quite an exciting game, all things considered. And hey, in the third period, I thought that there was a chance that the Flyers were going to win this game. Can you believe it? The one thing I know is that John Tortorella, despite the recent poll that showed that most players, an anonymous poll that showed that most players did not want to play for John Tortorella. If I remember right, he was number 1 on the poll. He gets results, even though he does sometimes, I think, alienate himself from his players. So that's something. But the big thing, thing I take away from this game is Alex Ovechkin. Something that seemed a bit like a desert mirage, that, Alex Ovechkin catching and passing Wayne Gretzky. Okay, it's going to happen at some point, but it's probably not going to happen anytime soon. And hey, he got injured. 16 goals away from surpassing Wayne Gretzky. There's already estimates out there about when, or projections rather, when he is going to do that. And the projections show April 10th against the Carolina Hurricanes. Must see TV, to borrow a term from the NBC sitcom era back in the day. So you'll make sure and want to set your VCRs for a monumental event. Now, again, this is just projections. There's a lot of things that could happen. It could happen before that. It could happen after that. He could face some sort of injury, but that is the projection. April 10th against the Hurricanes. Quite exciting. But before I get too far, let's dig into the game against the Flyers and a 4-3 victory. Walking away in victory lane. That is what it is all about. A game that truly showcased the team's resilience. And that's one of the things I talk about. That is a buzzword of the Capitals Locked On Capitals podcast this year, is the resiliency of this year's Capitals team, that even though they're down, they're not down and out. And oftentimes they can find a way to win. But the big thing, like I talked about, let's kick it off talking about Ovechkin, who is still in hot pursuit of Wayne Gretzky's legendary record. Ovi netted his 26th goal of the season. Father times, undefeated, all those kind of things. 39 years old, putting up 26 goals with a decent amount of the season left, tying the game at 1 after the Flyers open up the scoring and making history by becoming the 180 goaltender Fedotov that he scored on. Quite an accomplishment. And again, if you are an everydayer of the show, I talk about that. Of course, he is chasing down Gretzky, but it's everything that's happening between here and there. And just for him to have another notch, another netminder that he scored on, quite something. So, again, it is an exciting time to be a Capitals fan. And more than anything, it is an exciting time to watch this pursuit. Just a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, let's say a few years ago, it seemed like something that was going to be a long ways away. And even to start this season, and even last season's podcast, I was thinking, and I asked the question, it was a subject of some of the podcasts, was Ovechkin going to be able to catch him under his current contract, or was it going to require an extension? If everything holds true right now, he might be able to knock it out of the park in April and still have some hockey left to play, and then just really drive it into the finish line. Just really take that and just really rack it up next season, his last season under contract. And then after that, I think you could expect to see Alex Ovechkin sail off into the sunset, and quite a legacy and quite an imprint that he has left on this team and on the NHL. Like I've talked about on the show, when he first entered the league and we saw the great start that he got off to, I don't think in his wildest dreams he ever thought that he was going to be in the same company as Wayne Gretzky and at some point actually surpass him. Quite a moment to be a Capitals fan, and quite a moment to be a fan of the NHL. I feel truly honored to be covering this team and to talk about them, and just to be in an era of such a legendary moment. But it wasn't all about Ovechkin. Connor McMichael and the Flyers' response in the second period. Connor McMichael gave the Caps an early edge with a deft tip-in, bringing his season total to 19. A player whose career has grown by leaps and bounds this season, due in large part to he's played quite a bit with Pierre-Luc Dubois. I think he's just more confident. I think that he has that fear in the back of his mind that if I don't play really well in each and every game, I'm going to get sent down to Hershey. Now, that's still a very real thing in a guy like his career, but I think that he has established himself so much, putting up 19 goals in just a legit NHL player. I don't think that he really has to worry about getting sent down to the AHL. I think that he has found his forever home with the Capitals. And Alexei Protas with the assist, extending his scoring streak. And an interesting video I saw by Monumental, it was Dylan Strome they were talking about. I forget the other player that was on there. And that Spencer Carberry really loves the guys from Hershey. And he barks at his post-game pressers for only certain players, and it's usually Alexei Protas, and it's usually, if it's not him, it's a player that played for the Bears, Ethan Frank. But Alexei Protas, again, another guy that was good, a good hockey player, got it, a pretty good deal by the Capitals, and I was a little bit concerned. Was that the right deal? Alexei Protas has been huge, and I don't even want to think about a Capitals team without him on the lineup. But the Flyers fought back, capitalizing on some Capitals miscommunication, including a power play goal from Tyson Forster to even things up at 2-2. And then that's when Matvei Michkov did what he did, took advantage of the disarray, putting the Flyers up 3-2. And Matvei Michkov, one of the players that some people thought the Capitals should have really drilled down on or circled or did their level best to try to get him. And I think that ultimately they did. But in any event, Matvei Michkov is going to be a game changer for that Flyers team. And, despite his status, head coach John Tortorella is not afraid of drilling him down to size and putting him in his place. But the power play struggles. It's been a bit of a mixed bag for the Capitals this season. It's been a tough stretch for the Capitals, who couldn't convert on 2 opportunities. Again, one of the things I've talked about on this show all season long is that these errors, these deficiencies on special teams are going to get drawn into focus the later we get into the season. That when you're not making good on those opportunities, the Capitals rallied and found a way to win, but had they not, those 2 goals ostensibly that they could have scored on the power play would have really been drawn into focus. And now that's 3 straight games without a PP goal. I'm a bit concerned. You take a look at it, and I'll talk about the standings towards the end of the show, just to kind of give you the state of the Capitals, something they'll need to move on and work on going forward real soon. This is something that cannot be that can keep going on, that they're not making good on really great opportunities. But final period heroics, and Lars Eller, who has been kind of, blah, kind of, a nothing burger this season, putting up 2 goals in as many games, turning it up at the right time. But is it sustainable heading into the final period down by 1? Lars Eller, who turned the tide, netting his 2nd goal in as many games to tie it up. Really good. A really great shot. If you didn't get a chance to see it, look it up on YouTube. Quite something. But that third line, Eller, Ethan Frank, and Taylor Radish really stepped up, leading the team to a game-winning goal by Jakob Chychrun. The third line was big. Eller, Ethan Frank, and Taylor Radish, played a big role in the game. Now, with his 14th of the season off a great setup by John Carlson, Chychrun now leads all Capitals defensemen in goals and points. And, it's just really kind of increasing his value, that it's going to be difficult for the Capitals to get him under contract. Estimates out there are that it could be a 7 to 8 year deal if like the Draisaitl deal is any indicator. And are the Capitals really all in on a 7 or 8 year deal at a lot of money? I know how great that Jakob Chychrun has been for this team. However, that is a lot of money, ostensibly, and a lot of term to a deal. I like the deal. I think you got to do what you got to do to get a player of that caliber. Listen, we've seen this team without a blue liner like that. I think they need to do the right thing. And Charlie Lindgren, he is a guy that is fighting to get a contract and extension as well. Rumor out there is that there's talks out there with his agent that they want to get a deal done. But how much do the Capitals want to spend in net minding alone? We already know LT got that big deal, but with the salary cap going up, it gives you reason to believe. But Charlie Lindgren, who made it 19 saves on 22 shots to clinch a big victory for this team. His performance was critical in sealing the win. So Charlie Lindgren making some 10-bell saves, even though Matvei Michkov tried to do the Michigan-style goal, even though they tried to throw the kitchen sink, stood tall and kept the Capitals in the game. Now, offensive depth and action at Dylan Strome extended his point streak to 5 games with an assist. Dylan Strome, of course, huge center, primarily the first line center with Alex Ovechkin, huge. And Taylor Radish as well, stepping into his own, is on a roll with 3 points in his last 3 games. Talk about some great depth on this team. So taking a look at the Capitals right now, resilience. And even though they played down to a team, they found a way to rise above and pick up a big win. I knew, and Spencer Carberry mentioned it as much, that it wasn't going to be easy against the Flyers. It is a team that is trying to make a name for itself, and John Tortorella will do whatever it takes. All right, so after the break here, we will talk about Logan Thompson and the rumors that surround the real reason why he was not included in the Four Nations face-off. We're going to take a deep dive into the conspiratorial rabbit hole. I'll discuss straight ahead. Looking for tickets to your next big event, whether it's a concert, a comedy show, or a sports game, finding the right tickets at the right price can be a headache. But with Game Time Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Game Time Picks, the app does all the work for you. It curates the best deals so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. And that is the frustrating part, isn't it, guys? Your favorite band came to town, your favorite sports team, but you're thinking to yourself, what is the view of the stage? What is the view of the playing surface going to look like? Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can find me over on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So the Four Nations face-off is right around the corner. And what do we know? Not a single Capitals player was selected to participate in this event. But the biggest player, I think, that was snubbed, and the real reason that I am losing faith, I think that the Four Nations face-off has lost a lot of credibility with me, shall we say, is that Logan Thompson was not selected, even though most people think that he is the second greatest netminder in the NHL right now, right behind Connor Hellebuyck. He was not selected. So ultimately, what is behind it? And does his history with the Golden Knights have anything to do with it? Let's dive into that in this segment here today. We've got some hot topics, primarily Logan Thompson being left off the Four Nations face-off. Now, this definitely raised my eyebrows, and I think it, kind of drew into question with a lot of people that cover the sport. What is going on here? How could Logan Thompson put up such great numbers and not be included on this team, the Four Nations, especially considering how well Thompson has been performing this season? And he's been neck and neck with Connor Hellebuyck for the Vezina Trophy, and many have pegged him as Canada's top netminder, still not chosen for the Four Nations face-off. So quite something here. So there's been some insights with Steve Valiquette during a recent segment on Sportsnet's Real Kipper and Bourne show. Former NHL goaltender Steve Valiquette weighed in on why Thompson might have been omitted. He suggested that the decision is linked to the experience of Canada's assistant coaches, Bruce Cassidy and Peter DeBoer. What do those two guys have in common? Oh, that's right, a connection to the Vegas Golden Knights. These coaches had a stint with Thompson during his time with the Golden Knights and apparently had some not so great experiences, particularly when Thompson was unavailable for games. And this bad blood goes both ways, as it was Logan Thompson's feeling that the Vegas Golden Knights didn't value their netminders. They said that it wasn't really the netminders that were doing a great job. It was the stout defense in front of him. So I think that there's a bit of negativity, maybe a bit of a chip on the shoulder of Logan Thompson. And ultimately, I think that Cassidy and Peter DeBoer knew about that. It's certainly understandable that those experiences would color their decisions now. Now, that is why I am losing personally a lot of credibility, or I think that the Four Nations face-off has a lot of problems with credibility just based on the fact that a guy like Logan Thompson and all that he has accomplished got left off because the rumor out there is that Bruce Cassidy and Peter DeBoer didn't want him to be. Who are they? I think that there needs to be a readjustment on how they decide which players are selected. Now, since transitioning to the Capitals, Thompson has voiced that he hasn't heard from Canada's management team at all. And he seems pretty skeptical about receiving a call, even if injuries open us up a spot. And if I was Logan Thompson, I wouldn't answer the phone. If I saw that it was Team Canada calling me, I would reject the call. How you like me now? I'm too good for you. It's not you, it's me. It's not me, it's you. Those kind of things. Now, despite all this, his numbers with the Caps have been fantastic. That is what draws all of this into question. A record of 24-2-4, not to mention a solid 2.15 goals against and a .923 save percentage and 2 shutouts. Not good enough. Not good enough to make it in there. But performance metrics, that's the biggest thing. Thompson versus Montembeault. How do they stack up? When you look at the performance metrics, it's clear that Thompson is a force to be reckoned with. He's saved 27.8 goals above expected this season, which puts him right behind Connor Hellebuyck's 28.6. So on the flip side, Montreal's Sam Montembeault, who made the Canadian roster, has only saved 9.7 goals above expected, highlighting just how impressive Thompson's performance has been and how real the snub is against LT. Now, the upcoming Four Nations face-off. This is why I could care less. Not one Capitals player selected. As I record this, tied with the Jets for the most points in all of the NHL, not one player selected. An injustice. Remember, the Four Nations face-off is set to kick off on February 12th, replacing this year's NHL All-Star Game. And it's worth noting that Thompson isn't the only standout from the first place Capitals being overlooked. None of the Capitals players made the cut for this tournament. So if someone gave me, if I had to rate what my thoughts are on the Four Nations face-off, and I think if it's legit or if I don't think it's legit, I think the whole thing's bogus. I'm going to go ahead and say it. I think the whole thing is a joke. And as Capitals fans, I just don't even watch the games in my estimation. That's the way I look at it, that you take a look at what the Capitals have accomplished this season. And it's just a great injustice. Two other Capitals players, but primarily Logan Thompson. I just rolled off some of the stats there about Montembeault and the different players, Connor Hellebuck, that Logan Thompson was left off just because potentially there was some bad blood with some former coaches. Complete BS. And as far as me, as an NHL fan, as a Capitals fan is concerned, I will not be tuning in. All right, so coming up here after the break, the Capitals are in a good position. Like I talked about earlier there, tied with the Winnipeg Jets for the most points in all of the NHL. But what has me worried? What has Dan worried? Center depth is one of those things. I'll break it all down straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. All right, in this next segment here, we're going to talk about depth. It is something that I've talked about on quite a few different occasions here recently about the Capitals being in a good position. But are there any things that they need to work on? Are there any additions? Are there any holes that need to get plugged on the roster or any positions? And the biggest thing that is glaringly apparent to me is center depth. And primarily I'm talking about the third line center position. And I know that in the last two games, Lars Eller has put up 2 goals in as many games. So that's a good thing, right? But you take a look at it, how sustainable is that? How long has he been a Capital and how has he been pretty much non-existent? So that is what's drawn into focus. And also the most recent 32 Thoughts podcast, they talked about a position of need for the Capitals and they talked about a forward. And Elliot Friedman said, I don't know if the Capitals are going to go after a scoring forward or kind of more of a grinding, gritty forward. And his thoughts on it were you can't have enough scoring forwards. And I think that is the case. I think that they have some grit already on the team. I think that they need another forward, whether it's a center, I think ideally, or a wing that can put the puck in the back of the net. And the Capitals are doing pretty good. But like I've talked about ad nauseum on this show, is how would this team fare if they faced a substantial amount of injury? And are the players as is, even without any injury, is it good enough to stand up to some of the best teams in all of the NHL? And that is one of the questions. You know, I can talk about resiliency. I can talk about the accolades, the accomplishments, but there are still weaknesses that when you look at the teams that win Stanley Cups, they have a lot of depth. And they have some depth down in Hershey, but I don't know if that's necessarily going to plug the hole of, say, a marquee name like Pierre-Luc Dubois, Tom Wilson. One of these players got injured. So let's dive into that in this segment, talking about what the Capitals potentially could stand to bolster here a little bit, shall we say. Today, we're diving into some significant roster changes for the Capitals undertaking the 2024 season. We remember the big deals, including the Pierre-Luc Dubois deal from the Kings. Now, initially, that raised a few eyebrows, considering some of the things that we heard about Pierre-Luc Dubois. that he's a cancer in the locker room, that he only plays when he wants to play. Initially, that move was seen as a mistake. A lot of people snickered at me saying, hey, that he just signed an 8-year deal with the Kings. Good luck with that deal. However, the goal was clear. What former GM Brian McClellan wanted to do, he wanted to seize players with a proven track record, even if their current form didn't reflect it. And that was the stroke of genius by former GM Brian McClellan, that despite his poor season with the Kings, that he kind of saw the overall picture. He got a 30,000-foot view of this team, and he said, I know he had a bad season last season, but I think that he has a home with this team. Now, fast forward today, and it's clear the gamble is paying off. All things considered, Pierre-Luc Dubois has been a great addition to this team. As we're seeing this season, Dubois has made a remarkable impact on the ice, helping elevate the team's performance. And another highlight has been Logan Thompson, who followed up an incredible breakout season with a 6-year contract extension. And it's also great to see other players that were already here, like Dylan Strome and Alexei Protas, stepping up their games as well. You take a look at Ovechkin's pursuit of greatness. Ovechkin, who's been on fire, chasing down Gretzky, 16 goals away from surpassing the great one, Wayne Gretzky now. However, it's not all smooth sailing for the Caps. There are still areas that need addressing as we approach the 2025 NHL trade deadline on March 7th. Now, the Capitals are well positioned right now for a playoff push, tied with the Jets, like I've said a few times in the show, for the most points in all of the NHL. But focusing on core needs is vital, and the center position is definitely at the forefront. Now, earlier this season, the Capitals traded for Lars Eller from the Penguins to help bolster their center depth. We remember the players that cycled through. I'm talking Scarbosa and Hendrix Lapierre, this and that. Ultimately was not good enough. So the Capitals sought out familiarity and hoping that they could reconnect with some Lars Eller's vintage vibes. Now, while Eller got the Stanley Cup experience in 2018, his performance, save the last 2 games, hasn't quite lived up to expectations, and he's set to become a free agent this summer. This makes it imperative for the Capitals to explore other center options before the deadline. I would be most surprised if the Capitals give Lars Eller an extension. So they should have their eyes fixed to the future. Now, there are a few directions the Capitals could take this trade market. Well, someone younger like Trevor Zegras has a ton of long-term potential. The Caps really need to focus on short-term solutions that will help them capitalize on the opening championship window. And, considering the players that are signed to long-term deals with a lot of term and a lot of money, going out and signing a guy like Trevor Zegras, for example, to another 7-year deal, while they still want to get, Charlie Lindgren under contract, and they want to get Jakob Chychrun under contract, that I think that even though I'm against the idea of rentals, overall I am, the Capitals are in a unique position that if they pushed all of their chips in, it could pay dividends big time. And, I'm not talking about giving up Ryan Leonard. I'm not talking about giving up Crystal. But who am I talking about, for example, if they had to bundle a deal with a Hendrix Lapierre and, mix and match another player in there to get a solid rental, then I'm all about it. Now, some people, they might want to turn the radio off right now and go, did Dan just say Hendrix Lapierre? Yep, and I'll say it again. They've tried to retread that tire multiple times, and it hasn't paid off. And some people would say, hey, Dan, what about Connor McMichael? Listen, it's not a rubber stamp. It's not a carbon copy. It's not a one-size-fits-all. If Hendrix Lapierre is not ready to help the team this year in their push for a Stanley Cup, I am going to view him as a piece that is flippable for a greater asset. I want to view Hendrix Lapierre as an asset that we could bundle together for a greater player. So adding a veteran center could provide the depth needed without the complicated demands that come with younger talent. But let's not overlook the competition in the trade landscape. Other teams like the Maple Leafs are hot on the trail of other centers, while bottom feeders like the Blackhawks and Predators are also looking to strengthen their rosters for seasons to come. As we keep an eye on the salary cap, that's the big thing. We got to keep it under budget. The Capitals are projected to have about $3.65 million in cap space as the deadline looms, giving them some flexibility to negotiate. That said, creative strategies will need to snag the right fit for their needs. This is the year. Capitals fans, let's gather around the radio. Let's gather around whatever you're listening to this on, your phone, your earbuds. This is the year to make hay while the sun shines. Alex Ovechkin is having a historic season. The Capitals are tied with the Jets for the most points in all of the NHL. If there was ever an opportunity to go all in, this year is the year to get it done. No procrastinating, saying, hey, maybe when Leonard and Chris, BS. This is the year to push them all in and say, I'm going to get a little crazy here. I might give up a guy that I thought had high hopes for this team, Hendrik Slop here. Just years ago, we thought was going to be a key piece. I'm willing to do that because this team is a couple moves here or there. I'm going to go ahead and say about 2 forwards away from being a really great team that can weather any storm despite what kind of injuries or inconsistent play will be thrown their way. Hit me up on Twitter at DanCaps218 or at Locked On Caps and let me know your thoughts. Should the Capitals push all their chips in on this year's team? And oftentimes they get hit up. Absolutely not, Dan. No rentals. No rentals. Okay, to that I have to say, what did the Capitals do last season? And I understand this isn't the same roster. They made it to the final dance. They made it to the playoffs. Not the final dance. The final dance is the Stanley Cup. They made it to the playoffs, and they got swept by the Rangers. As Capitals fans, I want you to go ahead and put on your GM hat right now. Would you be willing to take this team into the playoffs as is? And how confident would you be with the roster as is? And you got to remember, after the trade deadlines, you cannot make any moves. You cannot make any moves outside of the organization. That if a major injury or two happened, it could spell the end of the season for the Capitals. Let that resound. Let that roll around. Let that reverberate in your head that they have a deadline that they can make moves on. And if they make no moves at all, that's it. If this team faces substantial injury, that's it. Everything that they've built up, everything they've amassed. Alex Ovechkin under contract this year, next year, it will be for naught. Or would you be willing to get a little aggressive and trade a big piece here or there to really push all your chips in on this season and saying, I think we can do it this season. I'm willing to do the uncomfortable things here and there to really accomplish great things. As for me, I got my GM hat on. Yes, historically, I'm not a guy that's about rentals. I really am not. But this is a unique position for the Capitals to be in. They have not been in this position in quite some time, that they are right neck and neck as the best team in all of the National Hockey League. If there's a time to push them in, if there's a time to really push hard, this is the season, and I would be willing to do it. And as Capitals fans, I hope you would be willing to do it as well. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Washington Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are what makes this show successful. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.